So Justice Callan is perfectly correct in my view.
Yes. And putting it into a new chapter. We've never before had a new chapter. And what are the other chapters about? They're about important things like the Parliament, like the judiciary. All of those have separate chapters in the Constitution. But it's even smaller than the miscellaneous chapter. There's a chapter called Miscellaneous in the Constitution. It's just about the national capital and deputies to the Governor-General. Not much in it. This chapter, this new whole chapter, is half the size of the miscellaneous chapter, which tells you we're not being told much. The complaint about a lack of details is pretty valid when you look at that and you look at the number of words, and it will go as a separate new, bold new chapter. It will go to the High Court judges with a signal, this is important. And it will be justiciable, that is to say, they'll be able to examine it, because you're right, they haven't got a provision in there at least trying to make it not justiciable. That is something which can't be the subject of litigation. And there will be all manner of all sorts of applications to the courts. And there will be all sorts of questions about to what extent they're entitled to make give advice, make recommendations, what you're supposed to do when you receive it, how you're supposed to read it. For example, they might even say that all politicians have to read it, and we know that the politicians, quite often, many of them read nothing. They wouldn't know what they were passing. They just sit there and accept the instructions of the party and vote the right way. I think it is an appalling situation, and I think he's right there.
Of course, they will be obliged to consider it. There's no question about that. So then we come to the question of what does consider mean? And that would be a justiciable question in itself, in my view. If the Voice decided that government had not given it adequate consideration, they could easily take that to the High Court.
And why would you put in so many words? There's only half the number of words of the smallest chapter in the Constitution, which is only the miscellaneous chapter. It's the dog-end chapter. It's only about having a national capital where it's got to be, because the New South Welsh were ornery over it having to be within the boundaries of New South Wales. New South Wales carried on about that. And about the Governor-General having deputies. All that chapter is about, and it has twice as many words as this chapter about the Voice. How could they possibly put in something about the Voice, which the Prime Minister himself has said you'd have to be a very brave government not to take notice of it?
Yes. In fact, that new chapter is actually less words also than Section 15 of the Constitution, which deals with casual Senate vacancies. So that's how ridiculous the idea is. A new chapter, it will signal to the High Court that this is a constitutional entity in its own right.
Yes, and we know from one of the men that the Prime Minister himself put onto his advisory group. He's photographed with him. That's Thomas Mayo. We know that Thomas Mayo says we will use the Voice to punish the politicians who don't do what we tell them. Didn't he say that?
He did indeed. The activists, Mayo and Langton and Davis, are telling us what their intentions are, but we're not. Well, not most of us are not listening to it.
And didn't Mayo say we have to honour our former elders, our communist elders, for doing this?
Apparently, yes.
Well,
but we don't worry about what Thomas Mayo says. He's irrelevant according to the supporters, except he's on the referendum design working group.
Yes, the Prime Minister's appointed him. He appears with him in photographs. I was very touched when the Prime Minister went, having come back from a few short hours in Alice Springs. They cleaned up Alice Springs. They'd taken all the people away from the street, so it didn't look too bad for the photographs. He was only there for a few short hours, but then he came back to Canberra and he was near tears when he was talking about the Voice. I was very, very moved by that, were you?
Very moved. Yeah, David, the other thing that is a concern is that we're hearing the question, or the Prime Minister's being questions on his policies in relation to Aboriginal matters. So he's proposing that Parliament will design this voice, and he's being questioned on what this Parliament's policies are. Will they abolish the flag or not? That's totally the wrong way to look at it. Once this thing's in the Constitution, any Parliament can devise a voice that and give it any powers it wants. And if we think our Parliament wouldn't be so stupid as to see important powers to Aboriginals, then we've only got to look at what they're doing in relation to climate change. What Minister Bowen is doing to our national self-interest in saving the planet. So this open-ended model is so dangerous.